What is going on, Diesel Nation? We're excited to have you guys with us today on the Diesel Podcast. It's been a really awesome year, 2021. We appreciate all of you guys that have supported us, joined our Discord app. You're going to find a link down below where there's a lot of really awesome stories, cool builds, a lot of information that's shared. I encourage you guys to go over there and make sure and join up. And we just wanted to thank all of you. And there's no better way that we could wrap up this year than today's episode. And we had received a message from Daniel Green. He's a podcast listener. And a really inspirational story. And it's not many times that we get to hear, well, really, if ever, from someone who sold everything and just pursued their passion. And that's what he did. And he was really passionate about diesel trucks, about racing. And he's going to go through the process with us, why he made that decision, some of the challenges that he had, not just with doing that, but then also a worldwide pandemic that hits and all the challenges that it's provided. Or really force people to have to deal with, and especially with racing and building a truck. So it's a really inspirational episode. I appreciate him reaching out to us. I hope you guys find a lot of inspiration with it as well. If you guys are listening on YouTube, I want to encourage you guys, if you're not subscribed to the podcast on YouTube, make sure that you click the subscribe button, hit the bell notifications. There's so much traffic that we get on there from listeners who aren't subscribed. So if you love the content, you like to hear about different parts and stories and oils and transmissions and turbos and all those sorts of things, make sure you subscribe. Definitely helps us grow. And we have some really cool things coming up in 2022, not just with content, but just ways you can interact with the podcast, like our Patreon account. You'll find a link down below for that. It's a way that if you'd like to support us, help us grow even more and be able to participate, with your truck as the cover of the podcast or be an executive producer or other really cool things. It's a way that you can help us. All right, let's get to today's episode with Daniel and learning why he sold everything and why he pursued a passion of racing a truck and traveling the country. Daniel, welcome to the Diesel Podcast. I appreciate you reaching out to me and saying, hey, I'd love to be on the podcast and tell my story and just, chatting with you for a little bit beforehand. I know we're going to have a great time. And I mean, I love talking about second gens, love talking about racing, and you have a really unique story. So welcome to the podcast and definitely look forward to it.
Hey, thanks, man. I've been watching your podcast and I've been sneaking around the diesel industry for a couple years now. So I was like, hey, you know what? I'll reach out to them and see if they are interested in it, and we'll go from there.
It's one of the cool things about doing a podcast with diesel enthusiasts is, we can talk to anybody anywhere, anywhere in the country and any part of it, whether they're racing, whether they're building a part, whether they're just, they've done a restoration, whatever it might be. And it's so cool. And I remember, early on and, when I became a diesel fan is I'd love to go to events and I'd love to just, watch and see and, talk with people and get information. And I didn't know anything. So, it's something that's really fun. I wanted to start with, really, your passion or your excitement for racing and what you're doing. Tell us a bit about, your background and how you got the truck. What made you, decide, hey, I want to race this thing and travel the country?
Well, I have a pretty unique story. Not a lot of people have done what I've done in this industry and the world, really. About 2 years ago, I decided that I was tired of the rat race. I was tired of just going to work and coming home and just, the living paycheck to paycheck type of deal. So there was a pretty turning moment in my life where I was just like, you know what, I'm done. Like, I am done with this. I'm done working 50, 60 hours a week. I'm going to do something that I want to do. And drag racing really wasn't something I grew up with. It really wasn't something that I inspired to do. Like, I really didn't know much about drag racing. I really still don't know much about drag racing, but I was always into vehicles, and I owned a second gen. It made, approximately about 800 horsepower. It was fun on the street. So, I just kind of put all the pieces together. I bought a race trailer. I bought a race truck, and I said, you know what? I'm setting out to do what other people dream about doing, and that was to go racing. So I did that. The journey started in November of 2019, And as many of you guys know, what happened in March of 2020, that kind of delayed my whole ordeal. I really fell into a deep depression of, I sold everything I owned to go out racing. And I was already living in a trailer of January of 2020. And I was ready, dude. The truck was ready. I was ready. We were going to go racing. And, COVID happened, and man, it really kind of sucked. But yeah, that was kind of the starting point of it. I've always, like I said, I just dream about going out here and do the unthinkable and doing what other people dream about doing.
That's really powerful, and I really want to focus on that because, personally and just stories and as I mentioned with the podcast, being able to chat with people all over is, I'll get these emails or these messages from people. They've heard my voice for 5 years, and we're always talking about trucks, and they'll say, "Hey, I'm in this career. I don't really enjoy it. I'm getting older. I feel like this is the last chance I'm going to have to do something I really want to do. I'm thinking about starting a diesel shop or
For sure.
changing a career," and just how scary that is. And, you had mentioned, March of 2020 and the pandemic and everything. And, I think in a lot of ways that hit a lot of people as we were sitting at home more. We couldn't necessarily go hang out with our friends or family or travel. And there's a lot of time to think. And you get to think, is this what I want to do? Do I want to work 50, 60 hours a week for somebody else? Do I want to sacrifice, my happiness or my freedom for these things? And so, I mean, that's really powerful. And I want to ask you, when you decided to make that jump or you were thinking about it, how did you find the strength to be able to overcome the fear or the unknown with that?
I've always had a fight in me, throughout my whole childhood. I've never been a person to give up. And so, and I've always been, it's kind of a downfall of mine, but I've always been the type of person to say yes and then figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
I
do the same thing.
A lot of people come up with ideas. They're like, "Oh man, I really want to own a diesel shop, or I love working on diesels, but how do I get started?" And then they try to think about it and plan it all out. And then by the time they get it all so and so put together, they're like, "Yeah, that's too much. I'm just going to go back to work on Monday,"
Yeah.
But I'm not recommending this for anybody because, our personalities, man, it gets us into some trouble. But I set myself and I told myself that I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it to my fullest. So, I just said, yeah, let's do it. So, then I started putting pieces together.
I think that comfort level, comfort can be very scary. And even chatting with friends or, family that I have that have at different points in their life thought, "Hey, I'm going to go back to school, or I'm going to major in this, or I want a career change," is what can hold a lot of them back is they think, well, I had this nice steady paycheck, I had this 401k, I have my health benefits, I get my vacation. Do I really want to risk that? And that's what captured me about your story is just going and doing it, because we all want to do that, whether it's a race truck, whether it's a career, just traveling, whatever it might be. So I know anyone listening is going to identify with that feeling, and just, sometimes you got to jump in. Sometimes, you can sit around for months and make plans and, write it all out and outline it. But there's a certain point you just got to jump in and just kind of, sink or swim.
Well, and that was one of the things, like, I watched, there's a couple YouTube videos out there, like Steve Harvey has a good video. It's called Jump. And until you jump, you never know what could be. And until you, just do it. Like, just freaking do it. It's like, it's honestly, Patrick, it's crazy, man. It's like, okay, you go into the burnout box, right? You do a burnout, and then you start spooling up, and you get to the line, and you stage, and you press the trans brake button, right? and you have your foot all the way to the floor, you start hearing it hitting the limiter, dude, there's no freaking turning back after that, man. You have the trans brake button, you're at 3,500 RPMs, and there's no turning back. Like, you got to bump in, and you just got to let go of the trans brake button, and you go. That's the best way I can describe what I decided to do back in 2020. I got to the line, pressed the trans brake button, and I just let go, dude. I just went. So,
well, another really powerful thing that you said is, you had everything ready to go, and
yeah,
early 2020, and then all of a sudden, like, everything stopped. I mean, not just racing, but just it seemed like the entire world just stopped. So when you make that decision to take the leap, you jump in, and then the brakes are hit on everything. Was it still that desire and kind of that fight and that adventure that you wanted to feel? Is that what carried you through till the tracks opened back up, until you could go out there, race the truck, and do what you set out to do?
You know what? That was a hard moment of my life, man, because I didn't grow up with money. I don't have a lot of money, In December of 2019, I had the truck in my possession. I had the trailer in my possession, and I sat in front of a computer for about 10 hours a day emailing companies for in just sharing my story with companies and influencers and people in the diesel industry and in the world, in hopes that they would latch on to my story and sponsor me monetary, financially, or sponsor me with products, or sponsor me with something. So between December 2019 and March of 2020, I raised about $15,000. And when the pandemic hit, I already spent that $15,000 on the truck.
Yeah.
I already spent that $15,000 on my living expenses, the race trailer, just getting everything ready. So when the pandemic happened, dude, I'm in debt $15,000 to these companies, and I have no way to advertise for them.
Yeah.
Race after race after race started getting canceled, and like, I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, dude, did I really make the smart decision to go out here and hustle this money from people and sell everything I own? Like, my comfort's gone. I'm totally outside the comfort zone for sure. So, honestly, it was knowing that I owed companies the opportunity to advertise for them. That's what really kept me in the game. And then there was an event that came up. Sometimes in life we have to look forward to the next event, or the next milestone. And Diesel World Magazine was hosting an event at the Wagler Motorsports Park, and I called Jeremy Wagler every single week, at least twice a week, and ensured that he was going to have this event in July of 2020. I'm pretty sure he probably got annoyed by me, but keep in mind, I was living in Oregon and he was in Indiana. So that's a 2,000-mile trip that I was not going to take unless I was guaranteed some sort of an event to advertise for my sponsors. Jeremy told me every single week, he's like, dude, yes, I'm having the event. Like, there's no ands, if, buts about it. We're having the event. We're in the middle of 2 cornfields. So you can't shut us down. So that was the first event that I went to, and that kind of kicked it all off, man.
Yeah, it's, I'm thinking about your story and what you're talking about, and there's so many listeners that I've heard from over the years that some have taken that leap, some haven't, that have wanted to do this. Whether some of it, sometimes it's racing, sometimes it's starting a business, and I always get fascinated by that part of it, because it transcends everything. Not just diesel motorsports, but just being a person, being a human being.
Right.
And then we hear about or even I know what it's like. I make a decision. I'm going to, work in the diesel industry, totally change careers. And then you get into it and you can hit a rough patch and you can kind of hit a lull where, maybe you're not as successful as you thought you would be, or, things are a little slower. And that's the part nobody tells you about. They don't
Right.
tell you how to pull yourself through that thing. So I think you feeling like you needed to represent the companies that helped you and the people that invested in you, something really important for anyone who's looking to, take on sponsors or race, is that relationship you have with them. Yes, they might donate, financially or with parts or with exposure, but it's a relationship where you're giving back to them as well. And, I read all the time people say, well, how do I get sponsored? And it's like, well, you can, but are you prepared to have that kind of relationship with companies? And I wanted to ask you about that part, with these companies that help you, how has that relationship grown from, 2020 to we're almost in 2022 now?
The relationships that I've made along the way in the in the motorsports industry has grown leaps and bounds. I wouldn't have done another season if it wasn't for my fans and my sponsors. I wouldn't. I physically I couldn't. Well, physically I guess I could, but it was mentally draining, and it was also very tolling financially to keep this race program going. But 20 October of 2020, as of October of 2020, I did 16 races, and I built up a lot of the momentum on social media. And my mom's health wasn't doing too well, so I went back to Oregon, and I got to talking with a few of the sponsors, and they really strongly encouraged me to go out for another year. But I set out. It was funny, man, because I set out to do another 12 valve engine because that's just the parts I had. I had the injectors, the pump, the P pump. I needed a motor, and so I reached out to a couple sponsors. One of my main sponsors. I don't want to say sponsors. I kind of let's say partnerships, because that's a lot better word. I reached out to one of my partners in the program, Wagler Motorsports, and I asked him if he was able to build me a bulletproof 12 valve engine. And Jeremy says, dude, I'm not going to build you a 12 valve engine. And for about 2 weeks, my head was held down, and I went back to him and I said, well, if you're not going to build me a 12 valve engine, I want to go racing, and you're the only person I know and trust to build me an engine. So what are you willing to build me? And he says, I'll build you a 2020 CGI block common rail engine. And I didn't reply back to him for a couple of days because a lot of your viewers, common rail swapping a second gen is not the best financial decision a person should do in their life. It's expensive. So to answer your question, I always just keep in contact and always reach out to my partners and ask them, what can I do for you? That's the main thing when it comes to getting partners in a race program, or just someone to help you with, a dealer discount or something like that. What can you do for them? I wake up every day and I think, what can I do for my partners? And I think being on the Diesel podcast, I think that's huge, man. So
it's creating that value, that value to a sponsor, to, the people who follow you, the people who are paying attention, the people that follow your social media. And that's probably one of the toughest things. I think I've drag raced, but I've never I've never traveled the country doing it. I would just go to test and tunes and have fun locally
Right.
with it. So I imagine that's monumental to be able to travel 2 or 3 thousand miles, and you're showing up, and little things are going to break along the way. You're going to need to fix stuff, and just
Yep.
having that kind of relationship is so crucial to it.
Well, and it's just like anything. It's just like anything in life, really. Like, what value do you bring to the table? It's hard. You can't go up to a sponsor and say, I need, will you sponsor me? Or, yeah, will you partner with me on a new set of injectors? Okay, Joe Schmo, I don't know who you are. I don't know, like, what's my ROI? What's my return on investment on giving you a dealer price on injectors? Like, what are you in return going to give the company, or, the partner? That's what a lot of people have to think. And what I think that I give back to my partners in this program is, for one, exposure, lots of exposure, good and bad, but also a reputable salesperson. I sell a lot of different product for all my partners. So I want to make sure that if they give something to me, I give it back to them tenfold. And I feel obligated to do that. That's the main thing, is like, when you get that, when you put a name on the side of your race truck, or you put a name on your daily driver, like, you are representing that company, and you should feel obligated to represent them in the highest power and the highest dignity. You know what I mean?
It's I'm thinking about that value, and it reminded me. I keep going back to 2020. I want to forget 2020, but yeah. I had a lot of friends that were successful, and they had made wise career choices and gone into different fields, and then there's layoffs. And It's not because they didn't do a good job, or they didn't, they weren't successful what they did. It was just how things worked. And I know a lot of them struggled with that idea of when you have value, and then all of a sudden it's taken away due to a once in a century pandemic, or any set of circumstances.
Right.
You struggle as an individual with, well, what is my value? And what I really love about your story is, when you made the jump from the beginning, decided to do this, is I kind of think you decided to make your own value, instead of, a company saying, hey, Daniel, this is what we value you at, or, whatever it might be. You set out to create it yourself. And that's what's incredibly powerful. And just in chatting with you, I could probably talk about that all night. We don't even get to the truck part talk, but I know, I know that's the cool part of it. But I mean, I commend you for that. It's a big jump, and I know people are going to be listening where they're struggling with that same thing. Is maybe they lost their perceived value, or what an entity told them their value was. Well, go create your own. Whatever that might be, just make your own. Then you're responsible for it, and not someone else or something else.
Yeah, and as a person that people look up to, your value is not determined based off of social media. I don't value myself at all on social media. Like, I don't care how many followers I have. I don't care how many people, how many, subscribers I have. My value is the person who I am, and also the person that I represent in public, the person that I represent at the track. You're never going to find me fly off the handle at the track. You're never going to find me, raising, cane at the track, like, or just in general. Like, you have to represent yourself and hold yourself to a higher standard. So people see value in your character. I think that's more of what my partners in this race program see in me, is the value that I bring to the table in my character, not on social media, not on, podcasts or whatever. It's just realistically the person who I am. So.
Man, that's what people identify with. If you think about racing, I think it can be really easy in a way for a company to build a race truck. Yes, there's financial expense with it,
Right.
but you're just throwing money at it
Yeah.
versus someone who's invested so much personally into the race vehicle and the whole
Right.
process of it. It's on a different level.
Yeah, that's kind of a controversial subject in the diesel industry, and that my name kind of evolves around. I'll be honest with you, man. Like, real, you're gonna think this is funny, but I just pulled the engine. I just pulled the engine out of the race truck tonight. But do you know that was the first time I ever pulled the engine out of a truck?
No.
I did it. That was the first time. It's sitting right behind us here. That was the first time I ever pulled the engine out of the truck. I am not mechanically inclined. Like, I know how to turn a wrench, but I don't. I didn't grow up around mechanical stuff. So, like, I add value to the program going in a straight line. I add value in the program of talking to people, but I've surrounded myself with a team of companies that help me. As I say, you're mentioning people put passion into building their stuff. Yeah, that's a pretty big deal in the diesel industry, is people building their own stuff. And I'm now 2 years into this program. I'm just now learning how to work on my own stuff, because I've always leaned on others, because I'm not, how do I want to say it? Like, I wholeheartedly believe everybody has a purpose in this life, and wrenching on a vehicle is not my purpose in life.
Well,
but I did pull the engine out. It's sitting right behind us. So,
I mean, but that's powerful in itself, because that can hold a lot of people back. It's held me back. I'm not that mechanically inclined. Like, I can understand concepts and how things work, but
right.
I've never rebuilt my transmission. I've never pulled the engine. Basic stuff I could do, but I know for myself that always held me back from pushing it farther, because I thought, well, I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to have one of my friends who knows how to do it, or somebody I know, or a company.
Yeah.
I'm going to pay them to do something. And I think that can hold a lot of people back too, is just, I don't know how to do it. And it's intimidating. And then you think, well, where's my support structure? How am I going to do that? And, when I think about, pulling the engine and other things that you're doing on this truck, where do you find the help or guidance from when you're going to tackle something, new, or you have a question?
Well, like when I pulled the engine out of this truck, I knew the engine was held in with, the motor mounts and stuff like that. Normally, well, we could talk about one of the races I had. I went on Rocky Mountain Race Week this last year. It's a 1,200-mile road trip, and I leaned a lot on Paul Cato over at Maverick Diesel and Levon at Fire Pump, because I had a lot of transmission issues, and I just had a lot of issues throughout the whole event. So those two people right there, I lean on quite heavily when it comes to mechanical type stuff. When it comes to like fabrication and just general knowledge and encouragement, I tend to lean on Joshua Chapman over at CFT Performance. So those three people, I couldn't do this program without those three companies there.
I've had Levon on the podcast, and Joshua too. I know Paul personally, but I haven't had him on the podcast yet. And they're all really great guys at what they do, and they're always fun to chat with and answer questions. And over the years, I've had questions about stuff, and I think finding that help or building the relationships is key as well. Is just being able to call those guys up, or anyone else that helps you, and just have those resources. And I think, just thinking back to people that have contacted us and just said, hey, I want to build a race truck, where do I start? And there's been a lot of great advice I've heard from our guests. But I wanted to ask you, if somebody is in your position or they have a truck that's sitting there and they want to race it, what are some tips you would give them to be able to make sure they're successful. Whether that's networking, whether that's, you know, building those relationships with partners, whatever it might be. What would you advise people to do before they spend a dime or do anything to the truck, but just right when they're getting ready to?
Make sure you. I would say make sure you reach out to qualified individuals to help you with your race truck. I would do a lot of research on products. I would do a lot of research on who. It's kind of like a football team, man. Who do you want on your team? And you're the quarterback. You're the guy that's always going to have the ball. Who are you going to want? Who do you want on your team? When I set out to do this, I ensured that I built friendships with the best of the best in the industry. But I think what I hear a lot from people in businesses in the industry, the diesel industry, is people are always asking them questions, but again, they don't, what value are they adding back to the friendship? If it's a friendship, and ensure that you're building that. Don't just hound people for information and then run off to Joe and Joe Schmo company and buy a product from another company. If you're asking about turbos, make sure, ask the best of the best and financially support them with the information that they provide you.
Yeah.
If they say get a 67 millimeter turbo with this, with this setup, it would work best, then buy the turbo from that person. I think that's the best way that you can do it. If you want injectors or whatever it may be, if you're asking that person for advice, be sure that you are willing to pay for their products also.
Yeah, that's really great advice. You think of these companies they're so busy, and it seems like everybody the last couple of years is either refreshing their truck, building something. They're investing in the vehicles that they have.
Yeah.
And you spend all this time with somebody, and then they Google a part number and buy it somewhere else. It's kind of like,
right.
It could be discouraging to them, And
yeah,
I think that's good advice.
Well, every phone call that a shop gets, I wouldn't say every phone call, but a majority of phone calls that a shop gets is 15 minutes. They're talking on the phone with that customer for at least 10 to 15 minutes. You need, I would say you need to provide something back to them for their time. If you're asking them questions and you feel like you're going to, that you're really in the market for a turbo or, an engine, whatever it is, be sure that you buy it from the person that gave you the advice. Don't go over to Joe Schmo and say, hey, Jimmy John over here told me to get a 67 millimeter turbo. Will you sell me a 67 mil? Because I know yours is cheaper. Like, let's not, that's my main advice.
Well, and you think about it too, like if you call Firepunk and you talk to Levon, how much experience do you have with a transmission question? Or,
right.
You call Josh or you call Paul, they've already paid into the learning curve. They learned it a long time ago, and they've seen it all. So, I mean, that expertise is incredibly valuable.
Well, and if you buy the product from them, you've already taken time off of their schedule to answer your questions. Then you buy the product from them, you're going to get the same amount. You're going to get the same customer service also, and that's another thing. Like, people or companies frown upon. Don't go buy Jimmy's turbo over here and then call Johnny over here and say, hey, there's something wrong with Jimmy's turbo. It really, man, it sounds crazy, but I hear it so much.
Right, it happens a lot. I wanted to talk about the parts, and you got me excited with that common rail swap. So what are the plans that you and Jeremy have for the motor and the air and fuel setup, and what are you thinking?
Yeah, so man, that's a very exciting subject you bring upon. So anyways, We got an invitation, a special invitation, that we are taking this Wagler Street Fighter engine to PRI. So PRI reached out to us, and Wagler reached out to us and said, "Hey, will you bring the engine to PRI?" I said, "Yeah, of course. Why not? I got to pull the engine out and get it refreshed anyway." So currently, what we have in the race truck is a Wagler Street Fighter engine. It is from a 2020 Dodge 2500. It was a burnt engine, but Wagler refreshed it up, and it is the new style CGI block. There's a lot of different things that Cummins did with these engines. It has the Street Fighter rods in it. Wagler has designed a solid roller lifter kit with it also. And then it has a Wagler side draft intake on it. It has Exergy 400% over injectors with an Exergy 14 mil pump. It also has, what else this thing got on it? It has a force induction 85 96 132 turbo. And it has a stainless diesel manifold. What else this thing got going on with it? And it has the famous where was I going with that? It has the famous 6-inch titanium tip exhaust from Chapman over here at CFT. So the thing is pretty.
Yeah, for our listeners that might not be familiar, what's so exciting, or why do Cummins enthusiasts get excited about these new engine blocks, the new engine?
Because because the piston has a little bit different design on it, so it's actually a higher compression engine. With the porting that we did of this head and the different style of piston, it spools the 85 mil. I can almost spool an 85 with no nitrous on a pretty hot, humid day. So spooling is a lot quicker. It does have a stock cam in it. We haven't upgraded the cam on this, but just the airflow, they just flow so much better.
I was gonna ask you how that turbo spooled. It's a pretty large one, and I'm sure the converter stall helps you a little bit, and getting on top of it and getting it launched.
Yeah, so we DPC helped us out with the converter this year. It had a 2300 RPM stall, and I could if I just barely got into it and just started rolling into the throttle, I could get it to spool without nitrous. It just took a little bit more, but obviously, we want to use nitrous to save the converter, but I could get it to spool without nitrous. So
as far as getting the truck put back together and hitting that first race, what are you shooting for next year?
Oh man, next year we have a lot of big changes to do to the truck for next year. I'm really going to focus on drag and drive events. Rocky Mountain Race Week, that's definitely going to be one of my big events. But next year we really want to we struggled this year with traction. We really want to get this thing dialed in and get it to go down the track A to B. We struggle with that this year. My lack of mechanical and geometry skills, played a factor in that. But we always, I am bound and determined to always have the highest horsepower CGI block in 2022. So there's the shout out there. So I got a couple things on my sleeve. So we do plan to push this new style block to its limit in 2022. So,
well, that's always exciting as well, as when you have sort of, I don't want to say a new platform, but there's definitely improvements that were made with it. It's just seeing what it can hold, what can it do. It's pioneering, something that as diesel enthusiasts, race enthusiasts, we want to see, and that just, it pushes it a little farther and a little farther. And I'm sure if we talk this time next year, you're gonna have a whole new set of goals that you're gonna have for the truck because you.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a different style block material, so no one's tested this material at a higher horsepower level. So we look forward to taking it over to Fire Punk and putting it on the official dyno industry, the dyno industry, and being on the leaderboard next year. So
now, for any of our listeners that are out there and they're like, hey, I want to see what Daniel's doing with the truck. I want to watch him race. Where are some places they can find you and be able to follow the progress with the build, the racing, the lessons that you're learning? Maybe reach out to you and ask questions. Maybe they want to know more about how you jumped into racing, or they want to know more about what transmission should I run, or what engine should I have, or turbos or injectors or anything like that.
My inbox is always available on Instagram. You can find me at Danny_diesel, the number 2 on Instagram. Like I said, if any of your listeners have any questions, I'll answer them or direct them in the right way. On Instagram, YouTube, you can definitely find me under Danny Diesel on YouTube. Facebook, I don't get into Messenger too much. There's just a lot of chatter and stuff over there. But if you guys want to follow me and follow the build, ask questions, find me on Instagram at Danny_diesel, number 2.
Well, I appreciate you reaching out to us and sharing your story, which is, I said throughout the podcast, was really cool. And there's a lot of lessons there. Whether we want to race or maybe it's something entirely different. And it's cool to see you just jump in, build those relationships with companies, and just go out there and do it. And there's a lot of inspiration there, to see that jump. So we appreciate you sharing your story. Look forward to seeing what you do next year, and definitely keep us updated on the build, what you're doing and how the truck's performing.
Well, I greatly appreciate your time, but if I could have 2 more minutes, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I just want your followers, if they've gotten to this point of the podcast, I just want you guys to wholeheartedly know that anything you want to do in life, you can do it, as long as you have a desire and a passion and a reason to go out and do it. You absolutely can do anything you set your heart out to. And the bullshit excuses, excuse my language, but the excuses that you come up with daily are irrelevant to the reason why you want to go out and do something. So if you want to build a race truck for 2020 and you want to run an ODSS, go out and do it. The truck's sitting in your garage. The parts are on the shelf. Put 2 and 2 together and just go out and do it. So I strongly encourage you guys to go out and build something and do something that you've always dreamed about doing in 2020. And if you need something or you need a little bit of advice or pick me up, feel free to reach out. And I greatly, wholeheartedly, and humbly am honored to be on the Diesel podcast, and I really appreciate your guys' time today.
Don't forget, Diesel fans, make sure and head on over to our Discord. You'll find a link down below. I want to see you guys over there. There's a lot of great information, stories. You guys pose amazing questions for me to ask guests. So I always post up on there and say, hey, this company's going to be on, this person's going to be on. What should I ask them? I love hearing from you guys and being able to ask those on a podcast. I also want to give a shout out to a couple of our Patreon sponsors, Texas Diesel Supply and Wrights Diesel Services. We appreciate their support, and everyone else who throughout the years, not just 2021, but all the way back to 2016, who have supported the podcast by subscribing, following, messaging us, sponsoring the podcast. We would never have even dreamed of being able to grow this thing this big if it wasn't for your support. So we appreciate you guys, and look forward to bringing you some awesome content in 2022. Until next time, keep the shiny side up.